Some crimes make you shiver. Others leave a permanent mark on a city's soul. In early 2023, just outside the neon skyline of Hong Kong, in a quiet, nondescript village known as Lung Mei, police made a discovery so horrifying it would spark headlines across Asia and far beyond. Inside a sparsely furnished rental home not far from the sea, officers found a large soup pot on the stove. The contents: vegetables, bones, flesh. Nearby, a refrigerator contained human limbs, cleaned, packed, hidden. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was planned. And the victim wasn't just anyone. She was Mei Lin, a glamorous 28-year-old model, adored by the public, envied by social media, and admired for her poise and wealth. To many, she had it all: beauty business acumen, a luxurious lifestyle, and a complex but seemingly civil relationship with her former in-laws. But what lay behind that polished image was something no one saw coming, because the prime suspects weren't strangers. They weren't stalkers or deranged fans. They were her ex-husband's family. Her former father-in-law, her brother-in-law, even the ex-husband himself, all suddenly tied to a nightmare no one wanted to believe. And the question everyone asked was the same: what could possibly drive an entire family to do this? Was it money, revenge, or something darker that no one had dared speak aloud? Whatever it was, it shattered the illusion of civility and exposed the underbelly of relationships that once looked picture perfect. This is the twisted case of Mei Lin, and this is only the beginning. To understand the storm that followed, we have to step back into the world of Mei Lin. Born into wealth and raised with privilege, Mei Lin wasn't just a model. She was a businesswoman, a mother of 4, and a recognizable face across Hong Kong's high society. Her Instagram was filled with magazine shoots, fashion shows, and affectionate moments with her children. Behind those curated snapshots was a woman managing complex relationships and silently carrying a heavy burden. At 18, Mei Lin married her high school sweetheart Kang Wei from a less wealthy but seemingly respectful family. Together they had 2 children, but the marriage crumbled within a few years. According to those close to her, Mei Lin found herself shouldering the bulk of parenting and financial responsibility even after the divorce. Then in 2016, she met Kristen Dawson of a restaurant mogul. Though they never officially married, they shared a deep bond and had 2 children of their own. Kristen welcomed Mei Lin's first 2 kids as his own, and for a time their blended family seemed to thrive. Remarkably, Mei Lin maintained close ties with her ex-husband's family. She even supported them financially, paying their rent, helping with daily expenses, and continuing to involve them in her children's lives. Outsiders saw an unusually harmonious arrangement. Some even praised the 2 families for rising above resentment. But behind the smiles, something was festering. Fast forward to February 21st, 2023. That morning, Mei Lin had a normal day planned, picking up her children from school, then returning home. At 2:15 p.m., security cameras captured her dressed in white, slipping into a 7-seater van. The driver, her former brother-in-law Kang Jie, who was also her personal chauffeur and former business partner. It was the last time she was seen alive. By evening, Kristen hadn't heard from her. Calls went unanswered. Messages remained unread. By midnight, he contacted police. His tone deeply concerned, not panicked yet. The next day, February 22nd, authorities officially declared Mei Lin a missing person. Posters went up. The search began. What followed was a rare show of urgency. Kristen offered $2 million in reward money, roughly $250,000 for any information. Mei Lin's family matched the offer. Even her closest friends contributed. Altogether, a bounty of $6 million lit up headlines, nearly $750,000. But within 48 hours, detectives started to shift their focus. Behind the scenes, police uncovered something critical: a property dispute between Mei Lin and her former in-laws. Years earlier, she had purchased a lavish home in a prestigious part of Hong Kong. But in a twist that would prove pivotal, the house had been legally registered under her ex-father-in-law's name, Mr. Kang. At the time, sources say she was trying to avoid paying millions in property taxes, but now she wanted to sell. Mr. Kang unsurprisingly resisted. And by law, if Mei Lin were to pass away without a legal spouse, her assets would be divided equally among her 4 children. That meant 2 of those shares could fall under the care of the very people she was trying to break away from.
The motive, though still theoretical at this point, was suddenly no longer unthinkable.
And something else was off. When questioned, Kang Ji, the last person to see Mei Lin, said she had stepped out of the car on her own and walked away. Just like that. He claimed the dash cam was broken and there was no video to back it up. The excuse felt convenient, too convenient. Police began cross-referencing phone records, GPS logs, and security cameras across multiple districts. The van never showed signs of stopping where Kang Ji said it did. Then they uncovered a disturbing financial paper trail. Mr. Kang had recently leased a small house in a remote village under someone else's name. The property had no furniture, no occupants, and no clear reason to exist. Except for one. On February 24th, officers made entry into that house. What they found shattered every remaining hope. Inside was a refrigerator containing severed limbs. A soup pot simmered ominously. Nearby sat gloves, saws, meat grinders, tools of cold, calculated dismemberment. The media erupted. The internet exploded. Hong Kong froze. And still many asked, how could a family once so close to Mei Lin betray her in such an unthinkable way? When detectives examined the crime scene in Lung Mei village, they knew immediately this wasn't the work of amateurs. The rental house had been deliberately stripped down. Only the essentials remained: plastic sheeting, a cleaver, meat grinder's gloves, and cleaning supplies. It looked more like a butcher's station than a living space. But the real breakthrough wasn't just the physical evidence. It was who had access to that house and how carefully it had been hidden. The name on the lease wasn't Mr. Kang's. Instead, it belonged to a woman named Wu Zhen, a massage therapist with no apparent connection to Mei Lin. At least that's what it looked like, until they traced calls between Wu Zhen and Mr. Kang. As it turned out, Wu Zhen was more than just a friend. She was Mr. Kang's mistress, a detail no one had seen coming. They'd met through a massage parlor. He needed affection, she needed money. One gave, the other took, and then, according to police, they both got involved in something far more sinister. Phone records placed Wu Zhen at the house multiple times in the weeks leading up to the crime. She'd also leased a second property under a fake name, believed to be a backup location in case something went wrong. The investigation now had legs, and they were moving fast. On February 25, police arrested Mr. Kang, his wife, Madam Li, and their son, Kang Ji, the driver. By morning, news vans lined up outside police stations. Online forums spiraled with theories. But one person was still missing: Kang Wei, Mei Lin's ex-husband. And it was this silence that spoke volumes. While his entire family was being questioned, Kang Wei had vanished. It took officers another day to locate him hiding near the international ferry terminal, reportedly preparing to flee to Macau. In his bag, over $500,000 in cash, designer watches, and burner phones. For investigators, this looked less like a vacation and more like an escape plan. But perhaps the most unsettling piece of the puzzle wasn't money. It was the motive. What could turn a once grateful family into alleged murderers? At the center was that luxury property in Kaduri Hill, a mansion worth over $70 million. It had been gifted by Mei Lin to the Kang family during her first marriage, but now she wanted to sell it. Technically, the home was under Mr. Kang's name, but legally, Mei Lin had bank statements and transfer records showing she was the one who'd funded every cent. If the property was sold, the Kang family would lose not just their home, but possibly access to Mei Lin's fortune as well. And here's the brutal truth: if Mei Lin died without a legal husband, her assets would be placed in a trust for her 4 children, 2 of whom were under the care of the Kang family. Some might say that's a reason. Others might call it a calculation. When police finally confronted the suspects with the evidence, the surveillance footage, the financial records, the tools in the house, one by one the denials began to falter. And then came the dream. In a moment that's hard to explain. Mei Lin's mother called detectives. She said her daughter had visited her in a dream, describing barking dogs, strong winds, and a mountain nearby. It sounded far-fetched, but when investigators cross-referenced those clues with the rental records and neighborhood descriptions, It all matched. Call it coincidence. Call it maternal instinct. But that phone call pushed police to investigate Lung Mei village, the site of one of the most disturbing discoveries in recent memory. And in that moment, the investigation wasn't just about catching suspects. It became about honoring the voice of a daughter silenced back or too soon.
When news broke that Mei Lin's former in-laws were in custody, the public was stunned. Not because they were suspects,
But because no one had seen it coming. To outsiders, the Kangs had always seemed cordial. Photos showed Mei Lin attending family events with her ex-husband's parents. There were even pictures of the two families, old and new, visiting temples together, smiling in group portraits.
But if there's one thing this case has taught us, it's this.
Appearances lie. The first suspect was Kang Jae Mei Lin's former brother-in-law. He wasn't just her driver, he had been her business partner. They co-founded multiple companies together, from beauty brands to snack ventures. On social media, he'd posted affectionate selfies with her, always calling her sister-in-law with heart emojis. But as the investigation revealed during the months before her death, things had shifted. Tension arose over property. Mei Lin wanted to sell the Kaduri Hill mansion. Kang Ji's father, Mr. Kang, refused.
So why would Mei Lin keep him on as her driver?
Some say it was her way of keeping the peace, maintaining ties with her ex's family for the sake of her kids. Others suggest she simply didn't see the danger coming. After all, these were people she had once trusted.
Kang Ji was the last person seen with her, and the one who offered a flimsy explanation that she had simply gotten out of the car and disappeared.
Police didn't buy it. Next came Mr. Kang himself, a man who once held a respectable career in Hong Kong law enforcement. He had medals, commendations, and a reputation as a disciplined officer. But buried in his past was something darker. In 2005, Mr. Kang had been involved in an internal scandal. Allegedly, during an investigation, he used police databases to track down a woman and was later accused of non-consensual contact. Charges were dropped, and he quietly resigned.
Now he was the alleged ringleader behind the death of his former daughter-in-law.
What happened in between?
That's still unclear. But police believe Mr. Kang orchestrated the crime, leasing the Lung Mei property under a proxy name, arranging logistics and instructing family members to keep quiet.
Then came Madame Li Mei Lin's former mother-in-law.
At first, her role seemed passive, but inconsistencies in her statements, surveillance footage of her entering the house, post-crime and DNA traces on items inside the kitchen, painted a more active picture.
Investigators didn't charge her with the killing, but they did arrest her for obstruction of justice. And finally, there was Kang Wei, the ex-husband.
Of all the characters in this story, his background might be the most volatile.
Once married to one of Hong Kong's most admired models, Kang Wei had over the years fallen deeper into financial troubles and legal messes. Between 2013 and 2015, he was accused of stealing luxury jewelry from multiple retail shops. Later, he posed as a precious metal broker on dating apps, scamming men out of millions of yuan. Eventually, he was charged with multiple counts of fraud and theft, but managed to evade long-term prison time. Despite their divorce, Mei Lin continued to support him. She paid for the children's schooling. She covered his parents' rent. She even made sure he could spend time with their kids. But on February 25th, as police arrested his entire family, Kang Wei was found trying to flee Hong Kong. He was carrying luxury watches, cash, and fake IDs.
It was more than enough to warrant arrest.
Still, one figure remained just out of the spotlight until now. Wu Zhen, the massage therapist and alleged mistress of Mr. Kang, was identified as the person who leased both the Lung Mei property and a second unused flat in the city. She told police she thought the property was meant for storage, but phone logs and GPS placed her at the crime scene during key hours. Authorities now believe she may have assisted in the cover-up or even helped plan it. Even more disturbing, another accomplice emerged, Fan Xiaohui, a social media influencer, and surprisingly a longtime friend of Mei Lin. She also happened to be dating Kang Wei. Photos from just weeks earlier showed her celebrating Mei Lin's birthday. Now she stood accused of helping Kang Wei evade arrest, contacting a third man named Lin Shun, who had connections to the Macau ferry route. By April, police were investigating an eighth suspect, an unidentified man spotted on surveillance footage, standing guard outside the rental home on the night of the murder. Rumors swirled that it may have been a half-brother of Mei Lin, but police have yet to confirm that detail. The deeper they dug, the darker it got. As the public watched in disbelief, one question remained. Were these people always capable of this, or did something inside them change? By late February 2023, the case had already shocked the public. But inside the courtroom, it became something else entirely, a test of how far the law could reach into the heart of a family. The initial hearings were held under heavy media scrutiny. Photographers jostled outside the courthouse while online commentators dissected every courtroom sketch and whispered rumor. But behind the frenzy, the judicial process was methodical, slow, deliberate, and bound by precedent. The prosecution charged Mr. Kang Ji and Kang Wei with murder and dismemberment with intent to conceal a crime. According to prosecutors, all three had played critical roles in the planning, execution, and cleanup of Mei Lin's death. But here's where it gets legally tricky, because while the evidence was gruesome, the tools, the leased house, the false statements, each suspect maintained pleas of not guilty. Their legal teams pointed to the absence of clear CCTV footage of the moment the crime occurred. They raised doubts about chain of custody for the physical evidence. They emphasized gaps in timelines, discrepancies in witness recollections. And they had a strategy: fragment the narrative. If they could each claim limited involvement or better yet ignorance, the court might hesitate to issue collective blame. Meanwhile, Madame Lee, the mother-in-law, was formally charged with obstruction of justice and misleading investigators. Prosecutors argued she tampered with evidence and coordinated misleading alibis, but stopped short of alleging her direct involvement in the act itself. Wu Zhen, the alleged mistress of Mr. Kang, faced charges of conspiracy to cover up a crime and misuse of identification for leasing false property. Her defense insisted she had no knowledge of what the house was used for. The court, however, cited phone logs, purchase receipts, and location data that painted a murkier picture. Fan Xiaohui, the influencer girlfriend of Kang Wei, was indicted for aiding a suspect's escape and withholding information. Her social media accounts, once filled with luxury bags and sunset selfies, became exhibits analyzed for hidden clues, deleted messages, and coded references.
Lin Xun, the man hired to assist in Kang Wei's attempted escape by boat, was charged with facilitating unlawful departure and intentional obstruction of justice.
Altogether, the courtroom saw 7 defendants.
But even as the legal proceedings moved forward, the eighth suspect, the unidentified man seen outside the Lung Mei rental house, remained a question mark. Rumors swirled. Was he related to Mei Lin, a hired hand, or a witness too afraid to speak?
Prosecutors were careful. They avoided overreaching. Their case leaned on forensic consistency, financial motive, and witness contradictions, not shock value. And in doing so, they painted a chilling picture, not of spontaneous violence, but of premeditated betrayal. No dramatic outbursts, no confessions.
Just slow, grinding accountability piece by piece. The trial itself is ongoing, with further hearings scheduled for the upcoming months. Each session pulls in new layers: inheritance laws, custody petitions, asset freezes. And while the verdicts are still pending, one truth has already emerged.
Mei Lin is gone, and the people closest to her are the ones answering for it. And maybe that's the hardest part.
Because no sentence, no matter how severe, can resolve the quiet horror of a family dinner table turned into a crime scene. In the weeks following the arrests, Hong Kong wasn't just mourning a life lost.
It was mourning an illusion.
Mei Lin had seemed untouchable, a face of elegance, a symbol of modern femininity, a bridge between wealth and warmth.
And yet it was this very glow that may have drawn the shadows closer. Her funeral was held quietly. 2 days, close friends, family. The color scheme wasn't black nor white, but pink, her favorite. A final act of grace, even in death. But beyond the ceremony, the question loomed: what happens to everything she left behind? Because Mei Lin was not just a victim. She was a mother, an heiress, a woman with assets valued at tens of millions. Since she and Kristen Du were never legally married, he has no legal claim to her estate. And her 4 children, all under 18, are now the only recognized heirs.
That means the guardianship of those children holds the key. Her biological mother, Madame Feng, filed petitions with Hong Kong's High Court to gain custody of Mei Lin's two eldest children, those fathered by Kang Wei. She also filed motions to freeze the Kaduri Hill mansion, ensuring the Kang family couldn't quietly sell or move assets.
It's a race now, not just for justice, but for protection.
Because with this much money on the line, greed doesn't end at the courtroom door. Public reaction has been intense.
Online forums dissected every relationship, every inheritance clause, every hint of conspiracy.
Was Mei Lin merely the victim of family greed? Or was she part of something bigger? A pawn in secret deals between her ex-husband's family and her current partners. Some speculated about money laundering. Others whispered of organized crime. Even the possibility of a cover-up involving social elites wasn't ruled out. But here's where it gets even more surreal.
One of the alleged accomplices, Fan Xiaohui, the influencer, was not only dating Kang Wei, she was also a longtime friend of Mei Lin.
Photos from Mei Lin's birthday showed them posing together, laughing, hugging, and just weeks later, one of them would be arrested for helping the other escape after her murder.
You might think, how could someone smile beside you while plotting behind your back?
But that's the haunting truth of this case. It wasn't just brutal, it was intimate. And perhaps that's what makes it stick. Not the headlines, not the wealth, but the idea that someone like Mei Lin, admired, generous, and trusting, could fall victim not to strangers, but to the very people she thought she'd forgiven.
The court cases continue.
Appeals will come, new evidence may surface, and maybe one day the full truth will emerge. But until then, we're left with a broken family, 4 orphaned children, and a city still asking, what really happened behind those smiling portraits? What does this story say about loyalty? About power? About the price of being generous to the wrong people? Or maybe the real question is this: if betrayal can wear a smile that wide, how would you ever see it coming?